Hi guys, welcome back to the channel Crime Wine Murphy. Murphy is my Shih Tzu, my partner in crime. Now this case is a Wisconsin case. Today was sentencing day for Alisha. Um, Her crime was taking the gun off a police officer, Nicole, and shooting her with her own gun. She blames the meds over medicating herself. But the judge today has sentenced her. So let's get into it.
Apologize to the courts, county, and police force of O'Connell Falls. I deeply regret my actions that led us here today. I'm truly sorry, Officer Nicole Blaskowski. I can't imagine the effects my actions have had on you and how they will continue to affect your life. I've dealt with mental illness most of my life. I've been misdiagnosed, over medicated, under medicated, and have had many mental breaks throughout my life. Honestly, don't recall all the events that got me here today. I'm sorry. I'm accepting responsibility for my actions. If I could go back and change them, I would. I'd like you to consider the Wisconsin Resource Center so I can get the help I need. I plan to take full advantage of any and all programming that will help in making me a better person. I like to become a better mother, sister, and daughter to my family. I'm sorry to everyone affected by my actions. Thank you for allowing me to speak and express my remorse. I hope one day Officer Nicole Blaskowski will find it in her heart to forgive me. Thank you.
My name is Officer Nicole Blaskowski.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Alisha, over the last 3 years, I've had so many conversations with myself about what I would say to you when I was finally given the opportunity. I wanted to scream at you. I wanted to ask you why. I wanted to tell you that I've forgiven you. But now that today is here, there's no possible way to put everything I felt in the last 3 years into words. Quite honestly, I don't even know if you're in a place to feel remorse for what you've done to me. But I want you to look around this room, and you can't see the others that are in the overflow room, but I know every single face here, and they know mine. I was more than just a cop. I'm a wife, I'm a mother, a daughter, a sister, a friend, a best friend, a sister in Christ. I'm a part of the blue line, the white line, and the gold line. Even if you see me as just a cop, I was more than that too. I began my career in law enforcement when I was only 18 years old. My entire adult life, over half my life, was dedicated to serve, protect, mentor, and care for my community. There are people in this room that I have met on their darkest day, and because my career was more than just answering and closing calls, I followed up with them, came alongside them through their healing, and now they are here today to be with me as a friend. But the most important part of my life God has entrusted me with was to be a mother to the three of the most amazing, beautiful children. And even though I chose for them not to be here today, believe me when I say everyone in this room is advocating for them. A big part of me where a lot of anger still hides is when we were in negotiations for a plea deal almost 11 months ago. You refused to even budge from your time request because you had felt it was your right to be released from prison to see why I graduate high school. But let me remind you, Alisha, you chose what you did to do in front of your child. You forfeited the right to be able to choose what milestones you feel you have the right to be a part of. I just want to show you a couple pictures. There was some pictures that should be put on the slide.
There we go.
This first slide are some pictures taken on August 5th, 2021, the day before you entered my life. I took my kids to spend the day at Neshota Beach. This was the mother they had known all their life, the one who was there for everything, the one who wanted my kids to experience the life to their fullest. This is the mother that when they began their day on August 6th, 2021, they remembered. Can you change to the next slide, please? This is the mother they came home to. These photos were taken right after I'd gotten home, after I cleaned up the best I could before they got there, after I got as much blood washed out of my hair and off my face as I could. Can you take it down, please? My kids didn't ask for this. My kids were born into a life where both of their parents are cops, and they're so proud of us. They still and forever will be proud of us. When you were so worried about seeing your son graduate, you never considered you were leaving my 3 children with an empty chair at graduation. You didn't care that even though you get to still talk on the phone to Wyatt once a week, that mine would have to go a lifetime with only talking to me through their prayers. Quite frankly, it's my kids you have to provide your unending thanks to, because it was because of them I chose to fight for my life after you screamed at me, "I'm going to fucking kill you," and shot me execution style in the back of the head. I went toe to toe with Satan in the pits of hell to survive, so I would return home to my children because it was only their faces I could see. And it is because of them you weren't spending the rest of your life in prison for ending mine. Even though there are so many more things I want to say to you, so many more questions I want to ask, I will end with this. My only ask of you, Alisha, is that when you are serving your sentence, use the time to become a better version of yourself. Even though it's been incredibly challenging at times, this has been my prayer for you, that you come to know the Lord, to become a better mother, and to become a better person. Could I make a statement to the court? Your Honor, first, I want to thank you for allowing me the time and the space to address the court. I felt like over the past 2 years, 10 months and 19 days, I haven't been able to use my voice to tell my side of the story. Not just from the time frame of the shooting, but my life before and after. I know from a judicial standpoint, what is important is finding guilt or no guilt in the defendant's actions and sentencing her accordingly. But from a victim standpoint, it's so much more than that. Your Honor, you've heard me tell the defendant that I've spent my entire adult life in the career of law enforcement. At 37 years old, that's over half my life. I started civilian patrol at 18 while working through tech college for my degree. I became a fully sworn deputy with the Shawano Sheriff's Department when I was just 20 years old. I worked in the dispatch center throughout my pregnancies and worked at Bondwell Police Department and most recently O'Connell Falls Police Department. In 2016, I decided to serve my community in another role. I returned to school and earned a technical degree and license to practice as an advanced EMT. I volunteered as a first responder in Bondwell, Gillett, and O'Connell Falls, and also worked at Menominee Tribal Rescue for a number of years too. My whole life, I volunteered and stepped up to work towards bettering my community. I served on a steering committee to start the Bondwell Food Pantry that's still in existence today. I've been a leader in Shawano County 4-H for over a decade, sitting the last 4 years on the executive committee. Through 4-H, I've recently taken 80 plus middle schoolers to Space Camp in Alabama, and 2 weeks ago taught arts and crafts and served as camp medic in our overnight residential camp. I've coached my kids' softball teams from T-ball up, coordinated fundraisers, worked concessions, made team jerseys, brought the supper, done everything so that my kids and their friends know that their mom will not only show up, but show up with snacks. Through my church, I lead and disciple weekly as a youth worker to middle and high school kids. Every Wednesday, I pick kids up from the Gillett and Suring area to get them to church in Shawano and bring them all home after so that they can experience Jesus at least once a week. I serve at our church's vacation Bible school and on our missions team, most recently deploying on a 2-week mission trip to the Philippines in January. This past week and through Monday, July 1st, I had the honor of being able to help host our pastor from the Philippines and his wife while they're visiting stateside. Your Honor, I'm not saying this to blow up or brag. What I'm saying is I just want you to understand what kind of person I am. Everyone in this courtroom has come to support me knows that I'm the first to give, but the last to ask. The people in this room know I'm reliable. The people in this room know I will always be the first to lend a hand. It was no different in my career. For so long, the defendant has been able to run with the narrative that she was suffering from a mental health crisis. That's why she chose to shoot me. Like I said to the defendant, there are people in this room who I can call friends that first met me when I showed up at their door after they called for help. I've always made it my mission to use my career as a catalyst for good. Every night when I go home, even when I was questioning my belief in God, I always prayed for the people I met when I was working. So I want to share with you the incident from my perspective. The perspective that is backed by several years working in law enforcement and EMS. On July 6th of 2021, I was dispatched to 140 Elm Ave in the city of O'Connell Falls. The caller, Alisha Kocken, was uncooperative with dispatchers and kept hanging up on them. She reported her son was kidnapped. When I responded, I looked up Alisha's name in our in-house record system and saw very few law enforcement contacts listed, all being completely minor call types. Alisha's name wasn't familiar to me and I never had contact with her before. I did, however, have prior knowledge of the apartment complex though. There were 2 known drug dealers living in that complex at the time, in addition to multiple known users who resided there. There was one known dealer who was known to frequently visit and was there that day. Upon first making contact with the defendant, her pupils were so dilated, I couldn't tell what color her eyes were. She was fidgety, kept shifting on her feet, sweating profusely, was aggressive, and not able to be reasoned with. From my training and years of experience in law enforcement and as an AEMT, these signs were immediately recognizable to me as visible signs she was under the influence of an amphetamine or stimulant. It's also been my experience in law enforcement that when someone's suffering from a mental psychosis as extreme as the defendant later claimed she was having, they don't go their entire adult life without having any prior similar contacts with law enforcement. Generally, there are numerous law enforcement contacts with individuals who suffer from such extreme mental illness prior to experience a psychosis as bad as this, especially in the weeks leading up to it. Also, as I stated before, I was dispatched because the defendant reported her son was kidnapped. I wasn't dispatched for a welfare check. I wasn't dispatched because there were concerns about her behavior. I was dispatched to a kidnapping that the defendant called the police for. I did not and still do not believe in the slightest that the defendant was having a mental health crisis. I believe she was under the influence of drugs. When I learned that the defendant was never brought in for a blood draw, devastated is an understatement. Anyone who works in law enforcement knows that amphetamines and stimulants have a short half-life and time is imperative to get the blood draw completed. I strongly believe that this whole case would have been shut and closed months, if not years ago. There would have been no defense of mental illness. Your Honor, I've beaten myself up over this shooting over and over and over again, thinking I missed something, blaming myself for her disarming me. I remember a DCI agent telling me in my second interview that I did everything right, textbook even, and I didn't believe her. It wasn't until recently, during trial prep this last March, that I had the opportunity to and was mentally prepared to listen to the audio recording. I went through the audio over and over with a copy of the Wisconsin DAT manual in hand, and the agent was right. I did everything by the book, step by step. There was nothing I could have done to prevent her from disarming and shooting me. I finally come to peace with that portion of the shooting. It took me 2.5 years to learn and believe that none of this was my fault. That's a long time to carry such a heavy burden. That's a long time to punish myself and carry the blame for the decisions the defendant made. And that's a prison sentence of its own. Your Honor, my life has changed drastically since I was shot. I went from being a healthy, active, fit 34-year-old to needing to be on 5 daily prescription medications every day. 1 for anxiety, 1 for depression, 1 for post-traumatic stress disorder and mood stabilization, 1 to sleep, and 1 to manage headaches. I have 4 as-needed medications, 1 for migraines, 1 for panic attacks, and 2 for pain when my shoulder and neck lock up. These are some of the injuries I was left with after the shooting, some of which I still live with today. Injuries from the gunshot wound to my head. For the first 3 weeks following the shooting, I was under constant monitoring because I would constantly fall because of the extreme vertigo symptoms. I had to be monitored and physically supported while going to the bathroom and using the shower. I didn't have the ability to drive for 3 months. Because of this, and 5-day-a-week appointments in Green Bay and Sturgeon Bay between occupational therapy, vestibular therapy, speech therapy, physical therapy, and behavioral health, my husband needed to take 3 months off work to not only support me mentally, but to be with me through it all. I required plastic surgery to repair the damage to my head, but will have permanent hair loss and disfigurement on my scalp for the rest of my life. A reminder I see every day when I look in the mirror. My last CT scan showed that there was still metal debris from the bullet in my head. I've developed tinnitus and still have hearing loss in my right ear. There were injuries to my shoulder because during the altercation prior to the shooting, my right shoulder was dislocated. During the dislocation, my labrum was torn and required 5 anchors to be placed. A chunk of bone was broken off the head of my humerus, and my bicep tendon was torn. Because of the head injury, I had to wait 9 months to have surgical repairs done on my shoulder to make sure I could tolerate the anesthesia. That was 9 months of living with a broken bone and shoulder that would regularly fall out of its socket. For several months prior to and after the surgery, about 6 months in total, I had 2-hour physical therapy sessions in Green Bay, 5 days a week, to regain the strength in my neck, back, and shoulder. The mental injuries. Since the shooting, I was diagnosed with depression, PTSD, anxiety, attention deficit disorder subsequent to PTSD. I get extreme panic attacks that come out of nowhere with no notice. These result in me ending up on the floor in the fetal position, unable to breathe or be reasoned with. For someone who has always been in control of regulating my emotions, the lack of control I have over these panic attacks disturbs me to my core. I do not have the ability to fall asleep at night, regardless of how tired I am, without taking a sedative. The sedative is also needed to put me in such a deep sleep, I can't remember my nightmares. My brain is constantly in fight or flight mode because it still has not yet learned I'm safe. Because my brain is in such a constant state of alert, I have issues maintaining attention. I forget conversations I've had. I've lost the ability to read books, which is a pastime I used to love. I don't have the ability anymore to read and retain what I've read. I struggle with finding words when I speak, and I've lost the ability to just sit and enjoy moments because I'm living in a mindset of constantly feeling like I'll be attacked if I'm anywhere outside the walls of my home. Unless you've gone through this yourself, it's incredibly hard to understand how it is to live that way. It's a nightmare. Of all the physical trauma, pain, and healing I've had because of the shooting, the mental effects it's had on me is hands down the worst of these injuries. Some of the effects that it's had on my family. After the shooting, we had school counselors meet with our kids at our home in the weeks leading up to school, so they could practice their responses on what to say when their classmates asked them about me. They were made aware of all the options they had if they felt emotionally overwhelmed and needed to take a break from the classroom. When we learned of the bond hearing, we had to have meetings with school administration to develop a safety plan so my children would have one-on-one monitoring when they were outside the classroom in case the defendant posted bond and would make the decision to attempt to harm my kids. For months, none of my kids wanted to have sleepovers or be at their friends' houses. They didn't want to be away from me. The time away from me while they were in school was a challenge enough. All my children needed to receive mental health therapy, and one is still actively receiving it. Another one of my children developed extreme separation anxiety when I'm separated from him longer than an overnight stay at his grandparents'. The morning of the shooting, prior to the call, I had called my mom and she wasn't able to answer the phone. The next phone call she got was to tell her that her daughter was shot in the head and her condition was unknown. My mom had to live with the torment that she may have missed the last moment she had to talk to me because she couldn't answer when I had called. Lastly, my husband still works law enforcement. So we're still the constant lingering fear of him not returning home after his shift. Your Honor, I want to add that last Thursday I was able to volunteer at COPS Kids Camp in the Milwaukee area. COPS stands for Concerns of Police Survivors, and this camp is for children and their living parent who lost a parent and spouse in the line of duty. As I was playing 500 with some of the kids in the middle of having a blast and getting to know all of them, it just hit me that these kids are here from all over the United States and they have one thing in common that no one wants to talk about. They're all missing a parent who was killed in the line of duty. I've been serving at this camp since 2022, and even though this camp is emotionally challenging, it reminds me of how blessed I am knowing I'm still here to be with my kids. Realizing how close my children were to being with one of these kids playing 500 with a bunch of kids they just met, all sharing that unspoken commonality that leaves a gaping hole in their heart. Lastly, the defendant took away my career. She robbed me of a profession that I loved and was so passionate about. She decided for me that I will never be a cop again. Your Honor, it's hard for me to share with the court the extent of my wounds because it's a mindset that I've actively worked to not allow myself to live in. There are still dark realities of my life I'm not in a place yet to share. Realities that stay between me and my closest loved ones. Some realities that still are just between me and God. But I refuse to dwell on the challenges of what my new life looks like. I choose to look at my blessings. Blessings that are so immeasurable and amazing that only God Himself could have handpicked them for me after an event like this. But it's my reality, though, and I feel it needed to be shared. When it comes to the sentencing decision, first I ask, in relation to extended supervision, you consider a number of things. The only regular support we've seen the defendant have is her mother, who is not a stable source of support that the defendant needs. By the time the defendant is released, her child will most likely be an adult, so she will have no responsibility to provide care for him. I ask that her extended supervision rules, on top of what the probation and parole agent recommended, include gainful employment if she is still within working age, with 3 or more applications a week until employment is achieved. I also ask that she's required to participate in a mental health and AODA program. I believe these things will help provide her with a sense of community and responsibility when she does finish her incarceration sentence. It is said that idle hands do the devil's work, and I feel it's important the defendant have something that requires her to maintain the best version of herself. I also think it's in everyone's best interest that the defendant is successful when she re-enters and lives within society. I also ask you are generous with the amount of time, extended supervision time you sentence her to, because the defendant's actions just while she was in jail alone prove she needs constant supervision to follow the laws and rules she's expected to follow. Her drug use in the jail shows the defendant has not taken any serious action yet on bettering herself while incarcerated and learning how to conform to society's standards. Your Honor, when it comes to the amount of time the defendant should serve incarcerated in prison, there's no amount of time that will ever be enough. The defendant gave me a life sentence of mental and physical injuries, and she deserves nothing less. The defendant had every intention to kill me. She screamed it in her own words at me, "I am going to fucking kill you." Then she shot me in the back of the head while I was begging her for my life. It was a matter of millimeters, my will to survive, and by God's grace that I'm able to be here today to deliver a victim impact speech and not my husband doing it on my behalf. Just because I survived doesn't mean that she should get a sentence that correlates with attempted. Her thoughts, intentions, words, and actions showed that she wanted to commit a homicide and she wanted to kill me. Just because law enforcement officers and their families must live with the dark reality, there may be a day that they might not come home after a shift. That doesn't mean we should put a stamp of approval on it either. The words, "they knew what they signed up for," should never be uttered. I think I speak on behalf of everyone in this room and all those who are watching when I say the statement needs to be made to our community that there is no open season on our cops. A message needs to be made that if you choose to harm those who answered the call to protect you, you should serve a heavy sentence. So with that being said, there isn't a set number of years I can name. I know and firmly believe her earthly consequence is not her eternal consequence. But I am trusting you'll sentence the defendant to time in prison that is fair and that she deserves. Thank you, Your Honor.
Had more than 50 pages of reports and analysis and called a pre-sentence report on behalf of the defendant, Alisha Kocken. And the reason I bring this up is because this hearing today is not just for the defendant, Alisha Kocken, her sentencing, but also for the victim, Officer Blaskowski, to also be heard and share with us just what has occurred to her. And she did it very well. August 2021. It was a Saturday. Officer Blaskowski, officer with the O'Connell Falls Police Department, left her home to work on the day shift that day. I'm sure she hugged or kissed her husband, her 3 children, and off she goes to work. Among other things, before she left her home, she of course attached her sidearm to her hips. And also she put on a bulletproof vest. How many of us go to work in our jobs, other than police officers, and have to put on a bulletproof vest? Around 10:30, O'Connell County Dispatch called her and advised her that they had received a suspicious call from 140 Elm Avenue in O'Connell Falls. She contacted Alisha Kocken in her apartment, and in the apartment with Alisha Kocken was her 6-year-old son, Wyatt, and the boy's father. Alisha was adamant at that time that her son was in the process of being kidnapped. It's obvious that from the recording, Alisha Kocken was very visibly upset and acting very chaotically. The minor son, thankfully, after viewing some of what we just heard on the audio, thankfully left the scene to be with a neighbor in the complex. Officer Blaskowski tried to de-escalate and calm down Alisha Kocken. We heard it over and over and over again in the audio. Alisha Kocken would not calm down, and at one point, she held Officer Blaskowski down. I think Officer Blaskowski had a hair bun, and held Officer Blaskowski down on the steps of the complex. Alisha Kocken removed the sidearm of Officer Blaskowski while holding the officer down to the floor, removed the sidearm, and squeezed off shot number 1, which went into the hallway or a closet. Then Alisha Kocken squeezed shot number 2, and it went in and out of the bulletproof vest. By the grace of God, it did. Alisha Kocken then squeezed that trigger a 3rd time. And the bullet grazed, indented into the skull of Officer Blaskowski. Yes, how many of us have to put on a bulletproof vest before we go to work every day? Alisha Kocken is 31 years old. As I said, she has a son, Wyatt, age 6. High school grad from Lena. Not a very good worker I think over the last 8 years, she probably has had a couple jobs over the last 8 or 9 years. The psychological reports that were referred to by the attorneys, of course, I reviewed those also. Well, one of the doctors said that Alisha Kocken had some type of a bipolar disorder, unspecified schizophrenic spectrum. Another doctor said that she had a disorder unqualified as a result of the consumption of THC. Prior to this incident, Alisha Kocken was on Adderall. Later it was changed to Vyvanse. And as stated, her doctor stopped her medications because the doctor became aware that she was using THC daily. And Alisha Kocken, for her credit, advised the PSI preparers that she was abusing her medications and consuming THC on a daily basis. Alisha Kocken has also advised the court that through the pre-sentence investigation report that she believes that she has overcome her addictions because as a result of her confinement of the almost last 3 years. The court in determining the sentence for Alisha Kocken is to look at certain objectives that I'm attempting to reach in determining the sentence. As stated earlier, number one is protection of the community. Our Oconto County police and sheriff's officers protect and serve us, as well as the general public. It isn't just the general public that needs to be protected from crazed individuals who abuse illegal substances and then can't be responsible for their actions. But it also must be that we as a community do what we can to protect and serve our officers. Alisha Kocken abused her meds and allowed herself to become mentally unstable with the use of illegal restricted drugs. Officer Blaskowski certainly showed the qualities of a law enforcement officer in attempting to address the chaotic atmosphere in Alisha Kokken's apartment. My observation is that she treated her with respect and dignity and compassion. And also she maintained a mental and moral strength to follow through. Which resulted in, frankly, the mental and physical harm that was caused to her. Another of the sentencing objectives I have to look at is the punishment of the defendant, Alisha Kocken. As I've already stated, she's already been confined for almost 3 years. She has been in my court numerous times over that period. As far as what I have been able to observe, she was shown to be, in my courtroom, cooperative, engaged, polite throughout this entire process. Again, She advises that her addiction to illegal drugs has been alleviated because of her long confinement. But there has to be further punishment than just the confinement in the Oconto County Jail. She has been convicted of 4 separate offenses. Number 1, attempted first-degree intentional homicide. Removed the firearm and squeezed the trigger 3 times. Number 2, resisting an officer. Number 3, a battery to a police officer. And 4, disarming a peace officer. Certainly further punishment is warranted for the chaos and injuries which Alisha Kocken caused on August 6th of 2021. Rehabilitation is another objective. Alisha Kocken certainly needs correctional treatment. And even she says that she would like to be placed in a resource center where her mental issues, past addiction issues, can be addressed. There's no question in my mind that those treatment availabilities can most effectively be provided to her if she is confined. I make no determination, however, as to where she is confined. That is determined by the Department of Corrections. Deterrence of others. We learn at a very early age, even as a child, that with authority, with parents, with teachers, with superiors, that we show respect and we do as we are told until we can rationalize those decisions by ourselves. All Alisha Kocken had to do was listen to Officer Blaskowski. Calm down. Sit down. Stop. Please stop. Officer Blaskowski's failure, Alisha Kokken's failure to do that escalated the situation to what we are facing today. Further, as stated previously, our officers, our law enforcement officials are there to serve and protect, and I'm damn proud of the job that is being done in Oconto County by all of our agencies. Police, county. They are there to serve and protect. They are not there to harm anyone. So let this sentence that I will give to this defendant deter others to recognize that when you receive a just directive from a law enforcement officer, that you pay attention to it and you abide by that direction. Another of the objectives I should consider is what is called within our system restorative justice. Pretty hard to do in this case. Pretty hard to do. Officer Blaskowski has to work with the results of this incident mentally and physically for the remainder of her life, as will Alisha Kocken in serving additional confinement time. There is no such thing in my mind as closure. There isn't. each of them will have flashbacks for the rest of their life as to what occurred on August 6, 2021. And I hope that Officer Blaskowski can find some other self-fulfilling obligation in her life that she will truly treasure, other than being a police officer. And for Alisha Kocken, going to prison is not easy. Each and every day is an additional sentence. And I trust and I hope that upon her release from confinement, that she can find gainful employment and again have a fruitful relationship with her son. The factors that I should consider in arriving at the sentence for Alisha Kocken is, number one, she has no record of any prior offenses. She has expressed her remorse and repentance. However, this crime was an aggravated crime, beyond any measure. Aggravating factors are, number one, the squeezing off of a trigger 3 separate times, 2 of the shots which could have killed Officer Blaskowski. One embedded in leaving the bulletproof vest, and number 2, the other bullet that grazed the top of Officer Blaskowski's skull. What is further aggravating is that she admits that she was abusing her medications. We don't have any excuses here for what happened. None. Because of her abusing her medications and THC, she caused herself to have some type of a psychotic experience. However, she still had the mental ability and judgment to call 911. She had the ability to explain to the officer what she believed was occurring. She had the ability to restrain the officer in wanting to do it. And then, of course, at the end, we have the 3 intentional shots from Officer Blaskowski's sidearm. Yes, this incident is most aggravating, as it concerns the gravity of the offense. So the court must impose a sentence that will be consistent with those sentencing factors. Certainly, the court cannot consider probation because that would depreciate the offense here, number 1. Number 2, the court is going to give a sentence to Alisha Kocken that I believe is the minimum amount of time that she would have to be confined in order to achieve a fairness as to her punishment and also to take advantage of her rehabilitation. As to count one of the information, first-degree intentional homicide, attempt. I sentenced Alisha Kocken to 13 years in the Wisconsin State Prison, 6 years of extended supervision. Count 2, resisting an officer, 1 year of initial confinement, 2 years of extended supervision. Count 3, battery to a law enforcement officer, 1 year of initial confinement, 2 years of extended supervision. Count 4, disarming a peace officer, 1 year of initial confinement, 2 years of extended supervision. These are 4 separate counts for 4 separate cases that were aggravating as to the injuries caused to the defendant, injuries caused to Officer Blaskowski. All counts to be served consecutively for a total sentence of 16 years initial confinement, 12 years of extended supervision, with this defendant receiving credit for 1,054 days of jail time. She is not eligible for the challenge incarceration program. She is not eligible for the substance abuse program. Alisha Kocken shall have no contact with Nicole Blaskowski, her family or residents as conditions of her supervision. She will enter into, participate in, and successfully complete any assessments, evaluations, AODA assessments, treatment programs as directed by the department. Upon her release from confinement, she to obtain and maintain substantial gainful employment. She must maintain absolute sobriety, no possession or consumption of alcohol, illegal drugs, intoxicating substances, or any other controlled substance without a valid prescription. Sentence to commence forthwith. Attorney Williams, anything you would like to add?
No, thank you, Honor.
Attorney Carroll,
No, thank you, Honor.
we are adjourned.
And there we go, guys. She's been sentenced to 16 years and 12 years of probation, supervised probation, for nearly killing this police officer, taking her gun and everything. So this police officer was on the stands, giving her testimony, and well, she's very lucky she didn't die, and she'd be going away for a very long time. She's been in jail quite a while and just wouldn't take any plea deals or nothing. She just dragged it on and on and on. Well, her sentencing day finally came and she's gone. And thank you for stopping by to the Crime Wine Murphy. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It's free. Thank you very much. See you next one.